Hey everybody, welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Lailani, and this is my show. This is how we grow. Every Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we get an opportunity to sit with, speak to, ask questions of, authors, influencers, and just people who have a passion for the spirit, for our connection to spirit, and of course to our communities, right? So tonight I'm really excited because I have author C.J Llewellyn with me, and she authored this amazing book entitled Chakras and the Vagus Nerve. Tap into the healing combination of subtle energy and your nervous system. I was really excited when this book showed up on my feed, and I immediately had to order it, and I immediately had to schedule, a chance to talk, because spiritual anatomy and this idea of subtle energies and different types of energies and how it moves and how it functions and how we perceive it and how we move it and all those wonderful complexities that occur is the foundation of our spiritual practices. And I think the foundation of just being human. I mean, at some point in school, you take a biology class, you understand what your heart does, you understand what your mind does, you understand what your lungs do, how your hands work, how your feet work. But why don't you understand how your chakras work? Why don't you understand how your aura works? Why don't you understand how energy moves through your body? Because once you learn something, you can interact with it and be a co-participant with it, which is really exciting. And tonight we get to talk about all of that with this amazing person. Now, C.J Llewellyn is a licensed professional counselor, a marriage and family therapist, and a trained internal family systems therapist, in addition to being certified in EMDR, which is basically eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And she is a Reiki master in the lineage of Dr. Magickal Usui. And CJ utilizes the polyvagal theory, energy psychology, and a knowledge of the subtle energies in her work in order to do that work, right? And you can find all about her on her website, www.cjllewellyn.com. It is down in the description below, as well as a link to her book, which I highly, highly recommend you get. Now, before we jump in, because I already see so many wonderful people showing up in the chat, I'm so excited. Hello, Omira, Zelma, Stephen, and everyone else who will be watching on the replay. Let's bring her on. Let's get started. Let's do this. Hey.
Hi, how are you?
I am fabulous, and I am so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for doing the honor of saying yes to coming onto my show. It really means a lot to me and my community, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Seriously, thank you for having me, because I greatly appreciate being here.
So there is so much to process with this subject, and there's so many directions that we can go with this subject. Yep. But first, I feel, because I always take a poll before we have our lives, and I ask the community, what do you think I should ask? What kind of things would you want to know just by looking at this cover, right?
Yeah.
And one of the big questions that I got in that poll was, what is the vagus nerve? And is it the same thing as that little spot in the back of your head that everyone talks about being calcified? And that if you have it calcified, your psychic stuff is blocked off. Is that the same thing?
Well, it's all connected. I think you're talking about the pineal gland.
Yeah.
Which is, it's really fascinating because as I started doing more research for this book, I was like, oh, there's even more connecting up into the brain system with the vagus nerve than even I realized. Let me tell you a little bit about how, first of all, the reason I even began to see the similars, or I should probably explain a little bit about what the vagus nerve is, right? Yeah. Just like you were saying, we get these biology descriptors. And I think, when I was in biology, you learned about this organ, that organ, this organ, and if you could stay awake long enough to get to the good part where you dissect something, you could probably see how it all connects. but you were still seriously only focused on getting the A in the class.
Right.
And not sitting with, how does this feel in my body? So when I started doing trauma work, I'm really big body, mind focused. All my modalities are body, mind. And as I would work through helping people process out their traumas, and I say process out because you can clear out traumatic responses. You can, through that bilateral stimulation of EMDR and a couple of other modalities that I use, you can really clear trauma out of your system. The thing is, half the time we don't even know we have it in our system. So learning about our vagus nerve is through the poly. If anybody wants to do a deep dive, let's go real sciencey here for a minute. Polyvagal theory is how I base my foundation in the book, based on what Stephen Porges, Porges, his research over the last 30 years. So I come into this through this trauma lens, and I'm helping people process out trauma, and I'm seeing things clear because as a trauma therapist, we know this. And all of a sudden I would start seeing people processing through their chakras. And I would see people, especially when we got down into early traumas, early attachment stuff, they would be really expressing, experiencing things through their root chakra, through their sacral chakra, through their solar plexus. And I kept thinking, these are chakras, and these are dimensions of these chakras that they're sharing. The memories are sharing here.
Now, are they using that language? Like, do they even know they're using their chakras, or do they say, "I feel a pain in my private part"?
Right, and they don't. Some of my clients have a knowledge, but while I am processing, I want to keep them in their affect. Right, I want to keep them feeling it. So I can kind of help to process that out with them. But if they start going, oh, yes, this is in my sacral chakra, and this is a chakra, they've just gone to their head. They're not processing anything out of their body anymore. So even my clients, every once in a while, I'll have a client go, oh, yeah, my throat chakra. And I'll say, well, and then I try to drop them back down to the experience that's going on here. But so I was seeing this overlay between the vagus nerve and the chakras. I'm assuming a good portion of your listeners, your viewers, have a working knowledge of chakras. So let me just give you a background on the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve, I really cannot express to you how important it is. It's not just something you learn in biology. It is our wiring system to just basically help us engage maybe in a safety level, on a safety level, that it's telling us if we're safe or not. Okay. Because you can't do anything unless you feel safe, except for run or fight or freeze if you don't feel safe. And so there are various branches of the vagus nerve that I think people really need to become aware of and to be able to understand what's happening. The three branches are the good stuff. I say the good stuff. This is the connection. This is what you and I are feeling right now. We've got our ventral vagus nerve on right now. We got the front. We are aligned. We got this communication going. We're smiling. We're looking at each other, even through the lens. We're looking at each other in the camera. We're laughing, right? We're feeling connected. I'm feeling happy and safe. That is where we all strive to be, because this gets us into safety mode. This is where us as human beings, because really we're only just mammals in our bodies, with our bodies, we need groups. We need to be safe in packs.
Exactly. Everyone needs a tribe.
Everyone needs a tribe.
You cannot do this life alone. You just cannot.
And but you can't do it alone. You can't do it with unsafe tribe either.
Right.
So you might have to find a new safe tribe, right? So that's the ventral vagal. The sympathetic, that's what everybody kind of hears. Oh, my sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic in this case is oh no, did we just hear a lion roar? Is that in your house or my house? What? So suddenly we tighten up. We start listening differently, right? We're no longer completely connected, we're starting to listen to our environment a little bit more.
Yeah, you
We
get
have to
those
run.
spidey senses.
The spidey senses, that's a really
Yeah.
good way to put that, right? So do we have to run? Is that your house, my house? What do we do here? And if it is my house, then I'm going to run out the door. No offense, Lailani. I'm not going to sit in the room if there's a tiger in my room. And so that gets us into that fight or that flight. So I can't fight off a tiger, so I'm going to run. That suddenly engages us into that. Then dorsal vagal, think of dorsal fin, way back here. That's our shutdown. That's our freeze zone. Dorsal is the oldest of the vagus nerve. And it's what gets us where we can't run anymore. We can't fight. We're pinned down, whatever. We collapse. We go possum. So that's not bad. This isn't the best. We have constant engagement through this, right? We're holding on to data sets in this vagus nerve. Well, where I was seeing it align is, like I said, as I was seeing this align when we were processing trauma and the meaning coming forth, and I would go back and I would look through my literature, my books, and go, the messaging is really aligned with some of these branches. So that's where I just started working in that way. And then, of course, one day I went, hey, there's a book here.
Right.
Because it goes to exactly what you're saying. And our physical selves and our etheric selves are not separate. We are a soul in our body having this experience, and we have the etheric energy that reaches outward. And I feel like I'm here to tell you that the chakras, the auras, are extensions of our soul energy that might be used in our central nervous system just to manage the ship a little bit.
So
that was just a very light overview. I gave you a lot.
Amazing. That is amazing. So, okay. So we spoke in our pre-interview about some of the classes that I teach, and I teach a class called Spiritual Anatomy. It's the very first class that I teach before we move on to anything else in the spiritual curriculum.
Smart. Yes.
And there's a reason for that, as you've seen. And I love how you said that they're not separate. It's true. We are spirit embodied. We are not a spirit and a body. You know what I mean? And
absolutely.
So, when we learn about these systems and how they're so connected to the physical body, that when you start to try and find the line that separates the two, it just, the gap gets tighter and tighter as you move closer and like there's just it blurs so deeply. Yeah. And so the modality that you found in your therapies, you found sort of that gateway or that bridge between mind and spirit, at least in your research here. And that's through the chakras and the nervous system.
Yes. And so as when I talk to therapists, I'm going to be presenting at a conference in a couple of weeks in Baltimore. I will be talking to them about how to help their clients process through this, right? So I'll be a little bit more psychobabble in that regard, trauma therapist, and just some of the questions you were saying. No, we don't get into analyzing what the chakras are. We allow them to sit down into them because the messaging of the trauma is there, right? Because it holds trauma as just as well as it has all these other messages. So yes, but when I'm dealing with more of the spiritual community, understanding that our biology is just as important as our energy, because our energy is simply an extension of our soul. And the body, to me, is the spiritual start, just like you're saying. This is where you start with your classes, because it's so overused, but it's so accurate. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, right? Not the other way around. And if we can trust, as hard as it is sometimes to be human, if we can trust that our body is the ship that our soul has chosen, I think it just shifts everything about how we approach our lives.
Yeah. It's tough because, I try my best to bring information to my community, which is a mixture of spiritual, indigenous, BIPOC kind of framework. And, you know, some information is so difficult to tie to our community because a lot of information comes from a place of privilege, like, you know, eating organic food and living that yoga life and getting those, you know, yoga pants and mats and stuff like that. It's cute, it's great, and it is a wonderful way to, you know, elevate the spirit and do all the things that we want to do, but some people just don't have access to that. And what I love about this particular subject is that it's the one thing amongst a few that connects everyone, whether you are Black, white, rich, poor, whatever. We have a spiritual system that we can understand, we can work with, and we can utilize as a tool to better live our lives regardless of the suffering, regardless of our circumstance, right?
Yeah.
And so for this processing of trauma that you have as a modality, have you seen in your research or among your clientele any differences within the different cultures of the people that you serve? Did you notice any differences in terms of where the trauma might be stored, if there's a commonality, or like
I like that question.
or like, you know, maybe how they needed to process or something? Like, was there anything congruent?
I really love this question. And just for a minute, I want to go back and thank you, because I really try to be culturally aware. I mean, as a white person, I want to be very culturally aware about all the spirituality that we're referring to, and that it isn't just access to people with means and privilege. Exactly. So I thank you for that. I got a little moved when you said that. That being said, I'm not necessarily sure that I see it in any particular chakras. However, the trauma that we sometimes process is different because it's more culturally based.
Right.
And so, you know, we're still all just human. We still have the same structure. So how we store those data sets, that trauma in our body, is also still kind of unique to the person. I mean, I could break down where I see some of it, but it's also very unique to the meaning of the person and how they experienced the traumatic situation.
Which brings us to the awareness, like this idea of discernment, this idea of, you know, regardless of where you come from, regardless of your circumstance, when you utilize this modality of processing trauma through the chakras and through your nervous system, you are doing so. What's the right way to say this? I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll pick it up. Okay. No, you know, I think that also there's a part in the book too that gets into this. I don't know why I want to say this. This is probably adding to what you're already talking about. There's a part in the book that breaks down somatic versus visceral, because we interchange that a lot, right? But there's the somatic, which is more connective tissue, more skin experience, versus visceral, which are the organs, right? The stomach, right? The kidneys, the heart, the lungs. Those also, both of those parts of our system hold on to the experiences. We're holding on however we made meaning, wherever we needed to try to find safety, and responded through our body as well. So what I wanted to kind of also say is, you don't have to do anything fancy. Just notice your body, right? Notice, oh my gosh, I'm shutting down, and getting the language of, wonder if this is my dorsal vagal nerve, you know? Oh, I'm feeling this connection, you know, this intensity in my sacral chakra, right? And oh my gosh, my stomach's acting up, right? That's the visceral. So, and then to be curious with it, because what we want to do is go, ooh, and shut it down. Yes. And this, we're holding on tighter. because maybe at the time that whatever we were experiencing, whenever, mostly talking, developmental trauma when we were young, that's how we managed it. We kept going, we kept pushing. But in this case, it's about getting comfortable with the discomfort. But if we get too out of the range, knowing who we could go to help manage that range as well. This goes into a little bit of the trauma processing, because we need to keep people in a certain range to actually process their trauma out. But
exactly. And we're just kind of, to step back just a moment, when we talk in the spiritual community, we use a lot of buzzwords around here. We really do. We use things like, oh my God, we have to do some shadow work in order to be better, spiritual people. And oh my gosh, we have to meditate and do this. And we throw around these terms that are very psychological, that people with no degrees have no business talking about. Mm-hmm. We have people, like all of these terms, but at the same time, they are necessary.
Yes.
And it is true. You should dive into shadow work. You should dive into meditation. You should dive into all of these things. And this modality in this book does an amazing job explaining why, and using examples that you have here. Like the example of the bilateral types of therapy, right? Mm-hmm. I remember one time I got so stressed out, and I called up my therapist as an emergency call. Mm-hmm. I was like, I am going through it. What do I do? I'm freaking out. And she's like, Lailani, I want you to cross your arms like you're dead. And I'm like, okay, yep. And just do one of these. Just back and forth, one of these. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, I look stupid. This is ridiculous.
But yeah, felt pretty good, didn't you?
Yes. After like a minute, after I'm done cursing, I'm like, this is so dumb. I hate this. I look like a fool. And it worked. Mm-hmm. It worked. And so the method behind that, you got all the science terms and you understand the methodology behind that. From the spiritual perspective, we see that as bringing yourself into alignment, bringing both sides of yourself, that masculine, feminine energy, into alignment, utilizing them at the same time to cause homeostasis within the body. That is just spiritual jargon.
But it's not jargon.
What is the medical jargon?
So I can give you some clinical that backs that up, because what you're experiencing, first of all, I mean, just doing this, you experienced it, but when you're sharing it, you're teaching it, you still have a framework for it. You just don't have the vocabulary, the clinical vocabulary. So the vagus nerve is bilateral. We see a lot of pictures of it sideways, right? Mm-hmm. Which is important because we need to know the front, the middle, the back, right? But there's a bilateral aspect to the vagus nerve. And they do very much align. They're always in contact, by the way, with the brain. They're always sending up and down signaling. But what's happening is you do have a tendency in all of your right brain, your right vagus nerve, the left branch of your vagus nerve as well. This is more intuitive. This has a little bit more linear processing, feminine, masculine. So you can pull all those things together.
Yeah.
And you're doing it. You just don't have the clinical,
right. Yeah. And it's nice because to see the two, I mean, no offense. I love the clinical aspect and I love science, but it is catching up to what spiritual information
I agree.
Had forever. Right.
Yeah. There's an integration that's occurring. And, so like when I try not to get too science geeky when I'm talking in the spiritual world, well, because I don't want people going, what? Oh, wait, what? I don't want to lose anybody's attention. But some of the research that is coming out of this, and we're just in the last 30 years, everybody, not everybody, but the Body Keeps the Score is a great piece of work that's a compilation of 30 years worth of research that Bessel van der Kolk and his team have done to realize, it really is about the body. Mm-hmm. Oh, it really is about how this from the neck down is holding, I'm just using my term, data sets. It really is a whole other way of engaging in the world. Frankly, I think the bigger way of engaging in the world. But yes, we have the right side, the left side. They're working in tandem as long as we make sure that they're working in tandem too. One isn't better than the other, right? So, yeah.
And there's it's not just having them in balance, but also understanding the amount you need to use of each at any given circumstance. So like, for example, when we talk about discernment, I always say to my students that in order for you to be discerning in the spiritual realm, meaning, when you go astral traveling or when you're working in spirit and you're encountering new entities that you've never met before, in order to discern whether those energies are helpful, harmful, or neutral, you need to be able to have that same level of discernment here in the physical realm. If you can't tell, who's with the intentions of this person and that person based on body language or reading this or the vibe or whatever, then it's not going to translate, over here. And one of the things that I notice, especially about with my friends and living in urban areas, is that we are very attuned to people and are able to pick out the ones that like, we got to stay away from that one. Or, you know what I mean? Yeah.
It's wiring. It's
it's wiring.
Am I safe? Being your system is attuned.
Yeah. And I think turning that on or giving that piece of the vagus nerve, because I think you said it was the second half of it, I think is what you said, is giving that a little more torque or a little more exercise within that particular moment in time. You're not worried about whether or not you should freeze or run. You're just worried about alertness. And like,
really good example of, you may still be laughing with your friend, you're walking down the street, you guys just got smoothies, you're gonna go do something, but you're aware. So it's a good example of how you're in ventral, engaging, but you're also socially aware of the environment around you. You're, is this dude walking too close? Or these, what's going on here? So we utilize different branches at the same time. And that's a really good example of how you're getting a little bit sympathetic. You're still listening. By the way, we listen differently. Our ears, our middle ears shift depending upon what's going on around us. So
I actually never knew that.
Yeah, it's cool. This is all Porges' work. This is not my work. I would love to tell you that I've spent this many years doing it. I've spent years studying his work and applying it out in the front lines. But no, it's the middle ear changes because the vagus nerve is also connected up into the middle ear. So if I'm sitting here talking to you, like I said, and all of a sudden, was that a tiger growling? My ears change. How my central nervous system starts engaging is different. So yes, that's a great example of how we're using two branches. We're sending information through two branches at the same time.
Yes.
You don't have to be in full sympathetic, but you are watching.
Right. Now, would you say in this particular example, just kind of, pretending this bridge is bridged, and the language between spirit and science, we're going to just play around with. Would you say that the activation of the sympathetic nervous system could also feel in the body, similar to like not in the body, outside the body, like an aura? Is that possible that you could sense it outside of your body? That I don't want to say etheric because it's not. An intuitive awareness.
Yeah. And I think what happens, especially when we're getting sympathetic, right? When we're meditating, we're channeling, we're doing whatever we're doing. We are in ventral because we have to feel safe to do that. We have to be open to do that. So when we get into sympathetic, I think we start, we're still using that energy, but we're now having to run. We're now having to watch. So we don't have the moment to sit and to feel the chakras. We will feel the chakras, right? But it may be the punch in the stomach. We got to go. Gotcha. We will feel the heart energy, but it tightens, right? Because our sympathetic nervous system starts engaging. So it makes us muscles tighten, right? Which means the blood pressure goes up because it's got to now push through the muscles, right? You know, throat might tighten up. So we do still have that energy around us, but we're now kind of not focused on it. I mean, that would be my interpretation of it, because we're not supposed to be. We're supposed to get out of there.
Right. It's a visceral response.
It's a totally visceral response. And I think it's really okay. We can't always stay in that zone.
Oh, no, of course not. Because it's almost like, you're in stress.
Yes.
You're in stress at that moment, regardless of the activity you choose, fight or flight. So yeah, because when I talk about the aura, and the reason why I brought that up is because when I talk about the aura, I use examples like, have you ever seen someone come into a room and they don't have to say a word? It's not about what they're wearing. There's just a glow about them. They light up the room. Everyone's eyes go to them. It's a very big energy that you see. And that aura is just emanating out of this person, that energy. And then you have a person that might come in and maybe looks at the amount of people in the room and gets very nervous, feeling claustrophobic, and decides to then kind of pull themselves inward. That, I explain to my students, is sort of like an auric, it's a response where you pull your aura back into yourself so as not to be noticed, right? This is an opportunity for you to sort of hide, right? So you pull that energy that would otherwise normally be seen and felt. You pull that inward in order to blend in and kind of go into the background. And either way, there's that nervous system aspect. There's that like response to the stimuli. Her energy is big. She's the center of attention. She, draws the room, but then she also
she's open.
She's open to it. She loves that response. It's a good thing. So it continues. The person who doesn't love it, the person who wants to disconnect, you could see that happening. And I think that just goes to show how that nervous system plays out in circumstances in life, right?
Yes, absolutely. And a good clinical term that Porges came up with was neuroception. So we don't know this is happening. Our system knows it happens before our awareness knows it's happening. So of course that plays into it. And we can feel, we can feel ourselves wanting to close in. And that's okay. We don't have to always be open. It's just like you're, talking to your students about. We shouldn't always be open. And especially
I always say that to mothers, if your child does not want to say hello to that person or doesn't want to give that person a hug or a kiss, you need to listen, because that child is perceiving something that they don't like, that they don't want.
And you need that's part of what, a lot of us, if we were lucky to have those kinds of parents, we were taught to respect our own system, our own messaging system. Regardless of how you want to break that down, we were taught to listen to our guts, right? And we were honored for that. But I know I wasn't, oh no, get up, say hello. That's rude.
It's your elder.
And you're like 2 years old going, I don't really like this guy.
That's true.
Don't be rude, or give them a hug. That's the people that want to hug little kids. And the little kid doesn't want to be in that person's energy. So hopefully I think things are changing.
Yes.
But yeah, it absolutely goes to that. And sometimes or just our neuroception. So the real inside out job, right? Our nervous system's doing things before we know what's happening, but it's gauging. And it's like real deep in and works outward. It also messaging comes back in, right?
Yes.
But in order to heal, I feel like we need to clear out the nervous system, because then our energy is different.
Yes.
Because I thought you were going to go to when you're talking about people pulling in, right? Which is, some people just naturally, they get drained around other people.
Yeah.
But sometimes that happens because they've had trauma and they're overstimulated, right?
Yes.
They're overstimulated by somebody else's engagement, or, lots of people in a room is not safe. our mind might know, well, we are safe. Our body is saying, no, I remember this. Our body is going, no. So, but a lot of times we don't even know we're holding on to trauma. That, I think, is where I'm glad that the conversation about trauma is getting out more into the general public.
Yes.
And for the most part, it's very accurate information, because we don't know that sometimes how things get messed up in our relationships, how suddenly we can't get over the same argument, how we get overstimulated.
The same patterns.
Yes, it's in our central nervous system because it's stored as this isn't safe, right? Mm-hmm. We might not even know it because some trauma we don't remember, or it was kind of interpreted as not being traumatic, because trauma is not just the awful, horrible thing that happened, like a rape or a massive car accident. Trauma is a lot of other things.
Oh, yeah.
Including neglect, verbal abuse. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing some stuff out there. It's very traumatic when you're a child and people aren't hearing you. People aren't tending to your needs. People are ignoring, and we can get deep into the weeds on that one. But it's stored as data sets. And yes, your body will shut down. And you might be going, what's wrong with me?
2 questions about that data set. The first one is, do we also store the data sets of our ancestors? There's a lot of talk about how our genes, record up to, I think, 14 generations back. So why wouldn't we have some of the cellular damage, some of the neuro damage that was caused by our ancestors? Is that possible, according to your research?
Yeah, and I would also say that as a family systems therapist, because my degree is in family systems, so I think systems wise, I think how did this experience affect your how did your great grandfather's experience affect your grandparents and down the line? I work on that way too. Yes, absolutely, and I think it does shift our biology. I also think the messaging comes down the line. And things like, I was kind of joking, I'll share this one thing the other day. I was talking about, sugar. If I get sugar in my system, I am off to the races. And then I want more cookies and more cookies. And I was talking to another therapist. I'm like, well, that's just because I'm an adult child of alcoholics. There's a gene in there that says, ooh, glucose. Yeah, we need more. We got a little bit, we want more. So that's pretty much a common example of how we can hold on to those genetics, how they got switched. I mean, I'd love to know what the data is on that, actually. I'd love to know how
you used a perfect example, like your own personal life, in the sense that you got the awareness. So you were aware that this sort of a little addictive personality that's sort of tingling in the back of your mind, if you will, is something that runs in the family. So once you've gotten that awareness, and then you expose yourself to that stimuli and you catch yourself in that stimuli and are able to say, no, I'm not going to engage in that. That whole process is healing. Like that whole, every step of that is part of the healing.
It's the awareness. However, it doesn't just stay up there though, because I've done my own work. I can't be a therapist and then not do my own work, right? Because it's different work. And I've done my own work around sometimes cravings or just the history around that kind of thing too. Yes. So then the body starts shifting a little bit. But once you're aware, this is a pattern that goes back to my family. And I know that for me, while it's not drinking, it's, get that cookie in your system. And then you're going to want another one, you then can help your system, maybe over time, completely change itself.
Speaking of time, there's a question here that had to do, Stephen, if you're still with us, if you can, because I think you asked this a few comments ago, and I don't know why my mouse is not working all of a sudden. Okay. Here we go. Nope. This one. So how much of that do we lose going from early childhood to childhood, from childhood to adolescence, and from adolescence to adulthood? But how much do we lose of what? Can you just specify that for us, Stephen? I'm not quite sure what part of the conversation we were on that one.
Yeah, because I want to guess at what he's saying, because I definitely have a response. If he's referring to trauma responses, like do we lose our trauma responses? Is that what you're saying, Stephen, over time? If something happened in early childhood? Or,
right. Even if something happened in early childhood that was triggering, then, you know, is it possible for it to dissipate with time and memory loss, or will those responses always kind of subtly be there until you address them?
So trauma therapists would say they were always there, but they may not always be predominant, or they may have been integrated into certain behaviors or patterns, or, you know,
because they can be functional too, depending on what they are.
Well, and at one point they were, because I almost said we don't not have that response, but we really don't. We have that response, how we engaged to keep out of trouble, to keep safe, to keep danger at bay, at one point worked for us, right? So it's integrated into our system now through our vagus nerve, through our neural pathways. You know, we're interpreting this. But let's say we end up with a real, let's say like a five senses kind of experience where suddenly, I don't know, this aftershave. I actually use this example in the book. Suddenly you're walking by someone with an aftershave and you don't even remember this trauma that you had from this person. But you're walking by someone else 15, 20, 30 years later, and you smell that aftershave. Your body then suddenly doesn't feel safe anymore.
Right.
But you can't remember what happened. But you know your body doesn't feel safe. You can keep on going and maybe sleep that off or cope in whatever way you did. Or you can find a trauma therapist and really go back, gently go back and look at maybe some points around that, utilizing some of the different modalities that are for processing this trauma out. And then you can process the response out, right? If the response was to go and shut down and suddenly you can't focus. So yeah, it still holds its place somewhere. And you know, that's where it's really, on some level, it's kind of exclusive to the person, but you know, early childhood stuff, sometimes it's way down here in the survival energy centers, which are also like the diaphragm, below the subdiaphragmatic, I'm trying not to get too sciencey here, subdiaphragmatic aspects of the vagus nerve that connect to the diaphragm. They're slower kind of moving, but they're also generalized feelings, right? So you might, I mean, just throwing this out there, let's say you were molested as a child. Your body's going to hold those memories, whether you remember them or not. Right. And they're going to play out somewhere along the line. And, you know, so yes, I mean, the answer, if that's what Stephen was asking, the answer is, yeah, they're still there. They're still there. And that's that awareness. That's that attunement you were talking about. Yes. That's where it's like, oh, this isn't something I can think away. It's just the way we're made. We can't, you know, our brain wants it. And, you know, our society has told us since the age of reason, right? Oh, we can think this thing away. We can put this in there.
And I think another piece of it too, I think one of the beautiful things about the art of psychology, right? The science and art of psychology and neuroscience and all the various therapies that are out there right now. I think what's so beautiful about them is, yes, they're there to help us connect mind and spirit, for sure, because we understand that it's a holistic thing, right? But it's also there to kind of help us adjust to the new stimuli that we need to, you know what I mean? Like you said, we had fear for that reason in those instances. But as we move in as a nation, as a people, as a population, hopefully with education. This is idealistically we're speaking, okay? Utopian.
I'm right there with you, though. I think we can get there. It may not be our generation.
So the education is good. Everything is good. And all we're doing is coexisting with one another.
Mm-hmm.
We understand at this point that fear is not something that is part of the environment. And so therefore, the job of the therapist, the job of the neuroscientist now is to understand, how does the body adjust to this new world? And what we're seeing, because we're kind of like in that sort of crossing stage. We're in that weird gray area right now. And so you are seeing a lot of people that are in that, we talked about earlier, in that place of privilege to be able to enjoy life and just simply, live. And they're having a hard time. So it's like, it's a beautiful thing to look at and to watch happen in real time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And yes, absolutely. And again, I think the messaging coming from the medical, psychological, sciencey world is that we got to do this differently. We know now it's not all about talk therapy. We just can't. Something I wanted to, you were mentioning earlier, you were talking about getting rid of the fear in your body. But think about it this way. Even if you grew up perfectly safe, really securely attached to the people you love, there's still danger in this world.
Yep.
There's still, you can fall off the curb and get hit by a car. There's still,
dog can bite you.
Yeah. You get hit by lightning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's some very natural, a tiger can release from the zoo. There are some, and that is, our vagus nerve in this regard is developed over millions of years, right? Because we just live in an unsafe world.
Facts.
Where our work can come in is clearing out the memories of old history that seem present to us. Yeah. So that we can discern what's actually dangerous. Because there are times also, the other thing, just not that hypervigilance, but there's other times that people can misread danger cues because they're so used to danger.
Exactly.
Right? So they get a little dorsal vagal or dissociative or, I know this. So there's, this is all about, I'm not a computer person. But the term defragging a computer, where you defrag it, everything goes back, all the files go back to where they're supposed to be.
Yes.
Right? In a way, I got to use that as a really loose metaphor there. But it's like defragging our central nervous system, where things can go back to the data set points where they're supposed to be, the files are where they're supposed to be, so that we can actually discern what is actually dangerous.
Exactly. And it's when you're telling that story, the only thing I can think about is like, yeah, bitch, this world is dangerous enough as it is. Suffering freaking happens all the time. So it's just like, why do we make it harder for ourselves to be mean to each other and do horrible things to each other? Like, what?
Because I think we're walking around with a lot of unprocessed trauma.
A lot of unprocessed trauma. Yeah. And that's what it is. I think, we can get into all kinds of stuff, political stuff, this stuff, that stuff, but really, truly, injecting fear into societies, people's conversations, whatever's so unhealthy. It's so unhealthy. Now, I have a question for you that's completely off topic, just an opinion. So one of the things that I teach in my class is the various spiritual bodies that kind of are within this body, that interact with this body. And the nervous system is that bridge, right? Mm-hmm. So with all of that in mind, is there any kind of electromagnetic play and a fluid play within the central nervous system and the vagus nerve, like this, to bridge these things together? So those two means of communication, electromagnetic and some kind of fluid, water, blood, whatever. Is that part of this makeup?
So you're kind of going to where I'm going to do a little bit of presentation with therapists, trauma therapists. So there have been a few studies of course, I'm like, oh gosh, where are my studies? Of the electromagnetic energies around the chakras.
Yes.
And I can't think of their names right now. I'm just
no, but I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about. And I do have them. I have written them down. I've studied them, and I just can't pull the names out of my head right now. But there have been a few studies that indicate the electromagnetic fields. So, but then you start looking at the bridge inward. There are things in our bodies that usually get in this far to the this kind of science, but we have things called baroreceptors that are in our bloodstream that are feeling, that are measuring, they're feeling where we are in our blood, where we are in our world, right? Not just there are other aspects of our body that give us, here we go, proprioception, where we are in our world. Baroreceptors in our blood. We have minute ways that our system is constantly gauging too. So, studies, I'm just putting this out there as my book. This is my experience. This is what I'm observing. Someone go off and do studies, just find those measure. I don't even know how you would sort of measure the two. I can see it's experientially, and I can see it energetically, and I watch it in my clients. But how you measure that would be, I'd love to see somebody do something like that.
I'm telling you, being at the precipice, watching those, watching the frontier happen, it's so cool. Getting an opportunity to talk to you and to so many other scientists and authors, like, it is so fascinating just to be able to sit here and pick your brain for an hour.
And I think there is hope, like you were saying. I do think there's hope. I think that when we can start the discussion of the healing and how it goes way beyond what we were told generations ago. I don't know, us humans, we move slow. Some of us like to move faster than others, but there's still hope, Yeah,
agreed. So it is our last 5 minutes. And of course, I want to ask you, is there any last words that you would like to say to the audience, or any words of advice, or maybe a subject you want them to look into, whatever your heart's desires? But before you say those last words, how can people reach you? How can people find you? What are you up to? Are you speaking anywhere? What's happening?
Oh, that's sweet. Well, let's go to the fun stuff first, and I'll give you where I'm speaking and everything else. So I would say, because this is like the core of my what I want to get out there, is that the psychological is the spiritual, exactly for what you and I've been talking about. Don't see them as separate systems either. Know that when we can clear the trauma out of our body, when we can really heal early attachment wounds, we have better relationships. We have quicker access to our intuitive abilities then, right? Because we're able to gauge differently. We're able to see danger as danger and not as the past and the present. Right?
Yes, I love it.
That is my core message: is the psychological, is the spiritual. Yes. And I've had many conversations with a lot of people, my personal friends who do energy work, etc. I think, well, they'll say, well, you work differently than me. I work in the spiritual realm. No, I do too. It's all integrated. So that's the message that I would hope everybody know that, you can have a Reiki master, you can have a therapist, and you can have a medium, all the same, it's all part of the whole reading the world, being integrated in the world. As far as finding me, I'm still building out my social media. I'm really embarrassed to tell you. I've been finding, I've been playing on TikTok.
Good.
I've been doing I can't believe I'm saying this. I love TikTok. I just, because you can do really quick videos. So sometimes I'll just put it out there, because it seems dense information, but if I could just do quick little videos about what dissociation looks like, just all of the things. So I've been putting that out there a lot. And it's C.J. Llewellyn.
I will make sure to find you.
And thank you. And, Instagram, and I am speaking to the Association of Comprehensive Energy Psychology.
Is that going to be online?
That one is not online. That is in person. Yay,
Okay.
finally an in-person conference.
Hopefully they videotape it and put it on YouTube.
They might. And that's when it's sort of speaking to my peers who also think like I do. I'm going to be doing Llewelyn Con. Don't have the date for that. That's sitting here in this room. So that's in June. And then I'm talking to Llewelyn about doing something in mid-June in Atlanta. And
yes.
I can't remember the name of the conference. I can't remember the name of the conference. I'm embarrassed to tell you that right now. But yeah,
but they
I'm
can
getting
always
out there.
go to your website. You'll have that on your website.
Yeah. Building that out too.
Well, I just have to say thank you so much again for
Lailani. It was such a pleasure. Just talking to you, even when we talked offline. It was such a pleasure.
We need to be best friends. That's all I have to say.
I'm like, have me back on. We can do this again. We get more specific.
We need to do it again. Yes. Yeah. And there's so much. There's so much I wanted to ask. And to be honest, your book too, it gives so many good exercises. You guys really need to get this book. Seriously. So go to the description below. There's a link to the book, and there's also a link to her website. Make sure you follow. And I want to give a thank you to who we got in here. We got Rob, we got Anna, we got Steven, we got a bunch of people in here. But thank you all for showing up tonight. And thank you to all who will be watching us on the replay. Thank you, CJ.
Oh, thank you. I love this.
And make sure you come every Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Like, comment, subscribe, and share. And most importantly, remember, this is how we grow. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.